Hello and welcome to this learning session focused on designing engaging asynchronous instruction. I want to take a moment just to share with you two resources that are super useful in virtual instruction. First, in the top corner, you'll see at your fingertips. These three guides really showcase and share with you a variety of strategies for organizing a virtual classroom, for engaging students in virtual classrooms, and finally in building and maintaining community within a virtual classroom. And then at the bottom corner, there is a strategies book. It is called 50 Strategies for Your Virtual Classroom. These strategies take tried and true strategies that are used in a brick and mortar classroom and really say, hey, here's how you can change, transition, tweak just a bit to make them useful in the virtual classroom. My name is Jen Jump, and I will be your workshop facilitator today. It is truly an honor for me to be able to share with you some ideas that I have been practicing and working with teachers and students since March of 2020. Teacher Created Materials is a family-owned company that began in the garage of a teacher over 40 years ago. Our founder, Rochelle Cracchiolo, envisioned creating a company focused on this vision: to create a world in which children love to learn. Each and every one of our materials and resources are created by teachers, for teachers and students with this very vision in mind. Our founder embodies the spirit in many ways. Here she is, Rochelle Cracchiolo, supporting Read Across America at a local elementary school. Rochelle is pictured here with Corrine Burton, the president of Teacher Created Materials, and Deanne Mendoza, executive vice president of Teacher Created Materials, both of whom are also her daughters. The spirit of Teacher Created Materials lives within this family. Throughout our time together, we are going to engage in conversation about asynchronous learning, beginning with the basics, identifying asynchronous learning instructional opportunities. Then, we will make sure to experience integrated asynchronous learning activities where we can think about how students will be able to engage even when they are not live in virtual instruction. And finally, I want to make sure you have enough time to truly parse through and determine the strategies that you can use to best meet the needs of your students. Let's review what you need to be successful and prepared for this virtual training. First, you should have access to the Learning Reflection Guide. This guide provides you with a space to keep the information from today's session organized. It also has several key slides on the last several pages to support your learning. Now, if I'm honest, I encourage you to grab some sticky notes and maybe an additional notepad and a pen just to keep your own thoughts and feelings and maybe even draw a picture along the way. Speaking of that Learning Reflection Guide, throughout this webinar, you will occasionally be asked to stop and do something on that guide. In my estimation, this is a time for you to reflect, to jot down some of the ideas that we've been talking about, some of the ways you might include some of those ideas inside your virtual classroom. So when you see this image, you are going to know it is time for you to stop and complete a portion of your Learning Reflection Guide. Okay, are you ready? I want you to remember, while we engage in our conversation today, it is important that you know and adhere to your school and district technology policies. The ideas shared today are ideas that can be adjusted. Technology can be shifted and changed to ensure you are able to complete them with ease and within the confines of your school and district policies. All right, drum roll please, my friends. We're about to get started. Now, I know that most of you have been engaged with students in a range of virtual environments since March of 2020. Talking with teachers across the nation, I want to share with you 4 generic tips that are going to frame the learning for all of us today. For virtual instruction to be successful, First and foremost, you've got to know the difference. What type of virtual instruction are you going to utilize? And in order to do the right type of instruction, you have to be willing to consider the purpose. Different types of virtual teaching work different for different purposes. Third, streamline. Streamline is what I like to call the KISS strategy. And KISS not like smooch smooch the loved ones, but keep it simple, comma, silly. It's not exactly what my college speech teacher taught us, but it's close. Keep it simple, silly. And finally, in virtual teaching and learning, we have an enormous weight and an enormous responsibility upon our shoulders to ensure that our students consistently feel as though they own their own learning. That is a necessary thing for our students to feel like, hey, I'm engaged and this is important. Virtual teaching is different. Putting your hand on the shoulder of your students is not possible. Looking over the shoulder as your students are working is not easy to do in a virtual environment. So we have to ensure our students truly feel like they own their own learning. So with that said, let's begin with know the difference. Well, when I think about knowing the difference, what I'm really talking about is understanding this notion of synchronous and asynchronous and independent instruction. And I love to be silly about this because I have a secret to tell. As a younger human, I was head over heels smitten in love with NSYNC. So when I hear the phrase synchronous and asynchronous and think about what types of learning, I think to myself every time, well, synchronous learning is like the very best NSYNC concert. It is live. We're going to see the gentleman up on the stage live and in person. So that's how you start remembering the difference. Now, if you are not old like me and you don't remember NSYNC, it's okay. Remember, synchronous is live. With that said, synchronous is live video. It offers a real opportunity for engagement. It can be accessed in real time and you can assess students in real time. However, one of the troubles with synchronous learning is that the class time is set. If language arts is from 9:30 to 10, every student must be online and available and ready at 9:30 in the morning. Asynchronous instruction is often recorded video, recorded audio, or assigned work that students will be doing not at the same exact time. Students can pause and re-watch recorded video or recorded audio. The tricky parts about asynchronous learning is the feedback is not during class. But hey, guess what? Class time is flexible. If all students need to watch an introduction to vocabulary video, students can choose the best time for them to watch it. As long as they complete it before it is what I would call due, they're set. And finally, there's independent instructional method. Now, oftentimes I'm going to say the line between asynchronous and independent gets really blurry. But asynchronous is the instructional part. Synchronous and asynchronous are instructional methods. The independent instructional method is what I would say is like the practice piece. It is self-paced. It allows for students to share and showcase their learning, share and showcase their understanding, and their work time is flexible because it is often offline. Now, independent learning can indeed happen online during asynchronous instruction, even during synchronous instruction, but it is oftentimes much more low tech. Now, I know our focus today is on asynchronous instruction, but I do just want to remind you that there are benefits to each of them. So here we have asynchronous instruction. Well, let's be real. There are benefits and considerations for synchronous instruction. The benefits, of course, are engagement. It's dynamic. The depth of instruction can be deep because the teacher can be observing and watching and discovering, like, where are my students at? Can we keep going? Do I need to pause? Do I need to reteach? There is an immediate opportunity for feedback. And just like I mentioned before, it is time-bound. It can be tricky for students to maintain engagement and focus. And let's be real. Tech issues can bog down synchronous instruction. With that said, asynchronous instruction is an important part of virtual teaching. Asynchronous instruction allows for students to engage in different ways. Asynchronous instruction, although it has lots of benefits, does indeed have some considerations. So first, let's talk benefits. It is flexible. Students can access different asynchronous lessons at a wide range of times. Students can choose to engage during the school day, or if it's easier, they could engage in the evening. Asynchronous instruction can be paced in a variety of ways. Students can stop and have an opportunity to think, or watch a little bit and finish it later, or do a little work and finish it later. There are opportunities for students to back up and re-watch pieces and components. And in asynchronous learning, oftentimes the learner is 100% in control of those things, of how they pace it out, how they watch it, how they engage with it. However, asynchronous lessons do have some considerations. First and foremost, asynchronous lessons can feel very isolating. Students are working oftentimes on their own, but one of the things I want us to branch out and be thoughtful about is how we can combat isolation. Engagement certainly can be a concern and an issue. And finally, feedback is delayed. Now I'm about to make some really bold statements, and I'm going to start with the term asynchronous and say this. Asynchronous learning is not simply recording a video for students to watch. Asynchronous lessons are not creating online presentations to watch. Asynchronous learning is not assigning extra reading. Asynchronous lessons are not providing worksheets to complete. But asynchronous lessons can and indeed include all of these things. I know that's tricky and like a little bit convoluted. I'm cool with that. The idea here is that asynchronous learning is not just this. It is not, okay, I recorded a video, that's asynchronous learning, and go. Asynchronous lessons are not just, I'm going to, instead of lecturing live, I'm going to record my lecture and say go. We have to think harder about asynchronous instruction because we're not there to monitor. Over the course of the last several months, I've been able to talk with teachers from across the nation. And one of the most powerful things we've talked about are the risks and rewards of asynchronous instruction. In fact, after talking about it, after teachers have experienced asynchronous instruction, I've asked them, hey, what, in your estimation, from your vantage point, as the teacher of students, are the things that you are finding to be the risks and the rewards? And as I ask this question to teachers across the nation, I'm really proud to share with you some of the responses I have been getting. The risks are the following. How do I know my students are going to do the work? And if they do the work, how do I guarantee its quality? And how will I know if it's too easy or too difficult? And frankly, I'm finding that it's really isolating and my students feel lonely and disconnected. These are the risks that combat some of the rewards, but if we hone in and focus in on these risks, we can start to kind of turn the table and ensure our asynchronous lessons combat these risks. On the flip side, my heart is warmed when I hear teachers talking about the rewards of asynchronous learning, to include a stronger connection between home and school. And as educators, we often crave and desire and want this for our students and their families and caretakers. And this is an excellent opportunity to recognize that that connection can be heightened by asynchronous instruction. Another reward certainly is that pacing. And when students are able to determine their pacing, they feel empowered They feel like they have some choice and some voice in their own learning and own their learning. And another reward that just gets my hair to stand up on end, it's so exciting, is that there's an opportunity for collaboration. And at the kind of the end of our session today, we're really going to be talking about how we as educators can infuse purposeful opportunities for collaboration. So now that we understand the difference, and I know you knew the difference, but now we've really parsed out the difference and we really understand the risks and the rewards around asynchronous instruction. I want us to make sure we consider the purpose. Why? Why are we doing this? Why are we choosing asynchronous instruction over synchronous instruction? So here are some things to remember. First, it is about the learning, not the teaching. It is about what students are doing, not what you are doing. So think first, what is the purpose of my instruction? What do I want for my students to be able to do? Will this be served better in a synchronous live learning environment or in an asynchronous learning environment? Also remember that learning is a process. This isn't something that just happens. Students just don't learn because we said so. It's a process, and no processes are exactly the same. We also want for our students to be doing the thinking. And something really powerful that I want us to remember in this virtual world is that thinking is more than the work. The work is here's your sheet, fill it out. The thinking is, here's a problem, let's discover, let's find things out, let's identify different components and pieces. That is the thinking. The work is just how you're showing it. We also have to consider things like, how much background do students already have about the topic? If I know that students are coming with a little bit of information and they can start to figure things out on their own, perhaps that's the best space to use asynchronous learning. But if they need a lot of background and I need to guide them and take them through the journey, perhaps that's when I want it to be synchronous learning. We also want to consider the ultimate goal of the lesson. What is the true objective? And will that be best found if we are together live or if we are working in an asynchronous fashion? What's the familiarity with the content? How much engagement do students need? Let's be clear. There are some things where we need to be able to be kind of peeking into the eyeballs of our students during live synchronous instruction. Those are not the places to say, okay, this is where I'm going to use an asynchronous lesson. No. Consider how much engagement do students need. And finally, will my students need immediate feedback? If the answer to that question is yes, this is not an asynchronous lesson because asynchronous lesson does not align itself to immediate feedback. Now, we've considered the purpose. I need for us to hone in and deeply dive into the struggles of asynchronous learning and talk about ways to truly flip the script for our young people. And we'll start by thinking about engagement. In asynchronous lessons, students need to be engaged. And I'm going to sound really nerdy for a moment. I'm cool with nerdy. But our young people are super into all things social media, fast-paced, yada, yada. I'm talking Snapchat, TikTok, all the things. Short video clips, regular engagements with people they don't necessarily even know. And one of the things I have really been interested in is the patterns around those short video clips. And one of the things I will share with you is that students are accustomed to hearing a regular greeting at the beginning of a video. One of my own children's favorite YouTubers, every time they start a video, they say, "What's up, guys?" Now, I'm not recommending that as your regular greeting, but it could be, "Hello, friends," and you wave both hands. Or you could have a special thing in your background to show, hey, we're beginning an asynchronous lesson, but a regular greeting is something that will allow for your students to feel like, hey, I know what's coming, I know what's happening, and if I pace it in the same regard every single time, students will say, oh, this is part of the pattern. This is how we're going to learn. So that regular greeting can be super powerful. Another way to ensure that students remain engaged is by giving them opportunities to do things. Now, I called this my turn, your turn. But if you are an 11th grade language arts teacher right now, you're like, I am not going to say my turn, your turn, because that would seem a little bit too much for an 11th grade student. But the reality is, during asynchronous learning, you can give students time to complete tasks. Okay, so now we've practiced this sentence. I just shared with you how to combine two sentences. Now your turn. Here are two sentences, combine them. Do it, quick. I'll give you a moment. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, time is up. All right, now read your sentence out loud. So you're giving students this opportunity to complete their turn. You can also allow for students to use physical movement. Even though you cannot see them and they're not, I know not every child will stay engaged, but if I am honest, kids do. I think about television programming for young children. And if you've ever watched any of the, there are several television programs where the TV talks to children and says, which tool do I need to pick out of my little circle of 4 tools? And the child can yell out which tool they think it is. Or, what do I need to get out of my backpack? And so students can engage with physical movement. Everybody put your hands on your head. And now we're going to tap out the word cat. At. Nice job. Great tapping. Those kinds of things engage students. Give me 2 thumbs up if you're ready. Thumbs up. All right. So signals work too. Yeah, I know you can't see them. They can't see you, but it is engaging for our young people. Also, I'm not talking about like young people as in K1, 2. I'm talking about K1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, because 12th graders need to be engaged as well. Another important piece, and I kind of mentioned this at the front, but that pacing. If your pacing is consistent, students will know what to expect. They won't be worried about the pace. They won't be worried about what's coming up. They will know what to expect, and they will be engaged in the content specifically. Now, for my students get very accustomed to me. I have a fast pace, but when I really want them to know something, I slow it down very intentionally. And students catch up and they figure that out. They understand the type of learning they will engage with you. Another thing we talked about was feedback. Well, here's the thing. Feedback in asynchronous learning is tricky. It takes time. I know that. So do the simple things like use visual stickers or visual prompts, so they can see, oh, I did this. I'm going to put a virtual sticker in your thing and I'm going to say, congratulations, you got this, you did this. You can also use audio feedback. So instead of always writing feedback, you can use your voice to share with a student. You did a really nice job here. Here are 3 suggestions. Move on. There's something I think can be very powerful in student feedback, and that is after students have completed some work, taking that work and using it as a teaching tool in the whole group. And that is when you can take a student work and annotate it and show other students, hey, here's how we can adjust, modify, here's how we can take the learning that we've had and use it. But what we're doing is providing honest feedback using student work. So those are some examples of how we can use feedback ourselves. We can also encourage our students to share with one another their thoughts and feelings and what do you think about your student, your peers' work? What suggestions might you offer? Did you find the same information or did you find something different? And we can use online applications to really allow for students to interact and engage with one another. So what I want for you to do right now is we're going to stop for a moment. And remember, we talked about these stop and do's. So in your learning reflection guide, you're going to look at number 1. And what your job is now is to jot some of those ideas down. My hope is that you've been jotting them down along the way, but I've given you a space in the learning reflection guide to jot down strategies to combat the challenges of asynchronous learning. Go ahead and push pause, and when you are ready, we will continue on and continue to talk about asynchronous learning. We'll see you in just a few moments. Now that you've been able to jot down some of my ideas, let's encounter a more concise description and further examples of asynchronous learning. What must we consider in asynchronous learning? I'm really going to boil it down to 2 basic things. First and foremost, we have to consider the activity, and we also must consider the work style. And we can differentiate and make these different based on student needs. So let's start with asynchronous learning activities. And I'm just going to list a few ideas here that are pretty basic. Examples: video, audio, interactive scenarios, things like customized quizzes, games, demonstrations, class discussions, and group projects. That's a very generic list, most of which you're like, yeah, for sure, Jen. We've thought about all of those things. Yes, of course. Well, let's hone in and talk about a few of them in more specific terms. One of the most popular ways to engage students asynchronously is with video or audio. Videos can host a wide range of information and teaching through the reading of text, introducing new information, demonstrating a lesson, a lecture, even modeling. I want to take a moment to share this collated researcher list that examines video, lecture, and teaching. I like it so much because it highlights a range of styles that can be used to engage students in different ways. We're going to focus on 2 specific lines here. The last line, it highlights this idea of speaker-centric or board-centric. This is something you can consider when creating video and audio for your students. Right now, you are engaged in a board-centric video, meaning you don't even get to look at my face. In a speaker-centric video, the speaker is at the center. Now, of course, there are other ways where you can put a speaker kind of in the corner or in the middle of the board. But here's the thought. There are different reasons to do different things here. I also want to share with you this line where it says static pictures, dynamic pictures, text, etc. And I love this idea as well, because I don't want us to lose sight that we can use pictures and photographs and text inside of our asynchronous learning to allow for students to truly engage. Now, with all of that said, in a minute not yet, we are going to watch a short asynchronous video that highlights vocabulary building through static pictures and some text. For reference, just so you know, this is from a topic-based unit, building knowledge and vocabulary around animals. So students have been reading about animals, and this is a short section of an asynchronous video clip recorded for students in actually 1st and 2nd grade.
Hello there, friends. Do you remember looking at this book earlier? Our Time for Kids nonfiction reader called Animal Mothers and Babies? Well, today we're going to spend a little bit of time looking at some of the vocabulary inside this book to help us read it. All right, are you ready? I'm going to read you all of the words to start. The first word is baby, mother, feed, carry, teach. Let me read them to you again. Baby, mother, feed, carry, teach. Okay, before we go on, can you count how many vocabulary words are we working on today? That's right. We are working on 5 vocabulary words. All right, here's our very first one. It is the word baby. Let's read it together. Baby. The next word is mother. Let's read it together. Mother. Let's read the first word again. Baby. And the next word, mother. Nice work. Those are 2 vocabulary words that we will be reading inside our book. Let's look at some pictures to help us remember what is a baby and what is a mother. Baby, mother. Here is a cat. Here is the baby. Here is the mother. Here is the mother. Here is the baby. And finally, let's look at that picture that we've looked at the whole time. Here is the baby. Here is the mother.
In looking at that video, I want to just point out some of the most important pieces. You'll note that there were pieces about that felt predictable. Now, granted, it is the first time you've heard that teacher doing a lesson, but it felt predictable. There were also components and pieces of that lesson that were engaging. It asked for students to do things like respond verbally. It could have included physical responses, although this particular one did not. And finally, you'll note that there was some chunked material. The great news is because this video was about vocabulary, it would be super easy for the teacher to very clearly articulate a link to independent work. Now, let's go ahead and watch another short asynchronous video teaching mathematics to more intermediate students. While we watch, I want you to notice more things that this video does to support our understanding about high-quality asynchronous instruction.
Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to Mr. Becker's math class. And we're going to begin this week with your lesson on understanding multiplicative comparison. Now, I understand that that's some big language that most of you may not have heard before, but I'm going to make sure that I break that down into some manageable and understandable terms for everybody. So let's take a look at what we're going to be doing this week. Today, what we're going to specifically work on is your math warm-up for this lesson and the vocabulary lesson that goes with that. After we have completed the math warm-up together and the vocabulary lesson, then you are going to get an opportunity to show me what you've learned by engaging in an activity that I like to call Tale of Two Towers, and also label your equation. You can also see that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday of this week, we are going to specifically spend time on Tuesday and Wednesday together as a class. And then on Thursday, I'm going to be pulling small groups. So I will let you know by the end of the day, Wednesday, what time I'm going to be sending you your invite to join the small group session and which of you that I'm going to meet with. And then Friday, we're going to wrap up the lesson with our math and the real world concept. So we're going to begin today's lesson with our math warm-up. And like I said earlier, I call this Tale of Two Towers. So basically what we're going to do is I'm going to show you what it is that I'd like for you to do, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity to do this at home. So the only thing that you're going to need to be able to complete this is just a scrap piece of paper and a pencil, because you're going to be building your own towers. So to start out, basically, I'm just going to build 2 towers. And the first tower that I'm going to build is going to be 3 cubes high. So I take my cube 1, cube 2, and then my third cube. And so I have built a tower over here that is 3 cubes high. And so for the second tower, I want to make sure that my second tower is 2 times as tall as my first tower. So let me go ahead and build a second tower. And I'm going to make sure that this second tower is as tall as my first one. But now I want to make it 2 times as tall as my first tower. So for my first tower, I have 1 block, 2 blocks, and then 3 blocks. And so I've built another tower with 3 blocks. So to make it 2 times as tall, I'm going to need a total of 6 blocks. So after I have built my second tower, let's make sure and see that it is at least 2 times as tall as my first tower. So my first tower, I have 1, 2, 3 blocks. And my second tower, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So what I've done here is I have built a second tower that is 2 times as tall as my first tower. My first tower, I have 3 blocks. And in my second tower, I have 6 blocks. So the other thing that I want to do with this is I want to write an equation that represents these towers. So for example, if I'm representing my first tower, the equation is going to be written as 3 times 1 equals 3. And so you can see that I have 3 blocks with a value of 1 for each block. That is going to give me a total of 3. And so if I'm writing an equation for my second tower, so if my second tower is 2 times taller as my first tower, and my first tower is 3 cubes tall, then I write this equation as 3 times 2, that equals 6. Now what I'd like for you to do at home is on your scrap piece of paper and with your pencil, I want you to build a tower that is 4 blocks tall. So here I have a tower, it's leaning just a little bit, but that is okay. And I want you to build a tower that is 4 blocks tall. And then what I want you to do is I want you to draw another tower next to it that is 3 times as tall as your first tower. So for this week, we've really got 4 vocabulary terms that we're going to focus on. Number 1 is multiply, and you can say that after me. Multiply, product, factor, and equation.
Well, Mr. Becker did such an amazing job with that asynchronous lesson around mathematics. Now, certainly those 2 different videos that we've watched were sections of videos. But what I want us to think about is, what did you notice? So inside your brain for a minute, just think, hey, what did we notice about those things? What made those asynchronous videos amazing? Now, I will tell you, Mr. Becker did a great job with his background. It looked really nice. The other one was a pretty plain background. I will say that's not what we needed to notice. What we noticed was that there were multiple opportunities for students to engage. In fact, students were asked to count things, they were asked to repeat things, they were asked to read things. There were also pictures and diagrams and models that really supported students' understanding. One of the things I noticed in Mr. Becker's example was he shared with the students a clear schedule about how this asynchronous lesson fit into their entire week's lesson of work. Wow, what a great idea. I also noted that there was a review component in Mr. Becker's example. There was also new learning, as well as a review of vocabulary. I don't want us to forget that there were scaffolds and supports, different things to help different students. So here's what we're going to do. We'll take just a moment. Again, take a pause and look for stop and do number 2. And there are really 2 things you can consider. First, what types of videos and audios will you use for asynchronous learning? Have you already used for asynchronous learning? But you can also truly consider, how can I now make it even better with the information that I've gotten thus far today? I'll give you a few moments. Well, welcome back. Thank you for coming on back. We're going to go ahead and continue. And as we continue, I want us to think about videos and texts discussions. So asynchronous learning, often we forget that students should and can absolutely engage in video conversations and in text conversations. Video conversations using external applications like Seesaw and Flipgrid, and text conversations using external applications like a Jamboard, a Padlet, etc. There are limitless opportunities. I want to share with you a strategy that I have found to be very helpful and very successful in encouraging students to participate in both video discussions and text discussions. And I call this the 1-3-5 strategy. And the 1-3-5 strategy says, okay, students, we're going to go have an asynchronous discussion about something using Padlet, for example, or using Flipgrid, for example. And 1, 3, and 5 mean this. You need to complete one. So you have to respond to the prompt one time, once. You must respond to 3 people. So here's the tricky part. If you are the first one to complete, you have to go back. And you have to go back again and maybe back again. But you need to respond to 3 of your peers. And you need to listen to, which I'm going to circle here now because it's not always listen to. Sometimes it might be read 5. So you've got to complete 1, respond to 3, and listen to or read no less than 5. So each and every time that students engage in an opportunity to have a discussion, whether it be a video discussion or a text discussion, asynchronously, they have this responsibility of 1, 3, 5. All right, so I'm going to give you some examples, the first being around vocabulary. Vocabulary, this is a great opportunity to allow for students to sort vocabulary, define, compare vocabulary. It could be to locate evidence, specifically to show and share what vocabulary words mean. So some time ago, we utilized Jamboard, and again, technology doesn't matter. You can use a wide range of technology here. We used a Jamboard to look at vocabulary words. Let me show you what that looked like. There were several different words that students were looking for evidence to kind of help define what the word meant. And so you can see here the word is sibling. And so students were asked inside this piece of text, where does the author really share and showcase? And put a sticky note that helps you share how the author gives you information about what the word sibling meant. And you can see here that students found brother and sister and brother and brothers or and sisters as their example. And that is how we utilize this conversation. It didn't have to happen live. We didn't have to be all together at the same time. The assignment is given, then students can go and do the work. And if they have 1, 3, and 5, they could respond 1 time, respond to their peers 3 different times, and read at least 5. Another example might be in science. In science, students might be responding to a question, sharing results from a study or an experiment. They might be comparing concepts or understandings. And they might also be asking additional questions to kind of continue the conversation. In this example utilized Flipgrid. And in this particular example, students were asked to watch a video. And you'll see the video about the solar system, and students were asked to watch the video and then record themselves sharing information from the video about the solar system. So they had to record themselves at least once. They had to respond to 3 of their peers in video form. And then finally, they were asked to listen to no less than 5. So the reality here is that students got multiple pieces of information about the solar system and were able to hear their peers talking, and they were able to then communicate and have a conversation. And you can see here that in this particular example, 169 different views happened in regards to these particular video clips from their peers. Another excellent example to utilize conversations is in regards to mindfulness. Mindfulness, that very important social and emotional skill, allows for students to share ideas, to support the classroom community, and to create a safe space for questions, concerns, thoughts, and ideas. In this particular example, students were given an opportunity to share their ideas around gratefulness. And so you can see different students began to react and respond to things that they are grateful for. Everything from Andrew saying yummy lunches, I'd love to know who's cooking his lunch, to Juan saying experiments, he's grateful for experiments. Destiny says my kitties, love the spelling. I personally found this hilarious. There was a young human in there named Mac, and that person is grateful for macaroni and cheese. And I'm like, of course you are. And then you can see the responses are in those little comment boxes. And so you could see students were commenting to one another, and you can tell if they were read because they liked it with the heart. So I just think it's such a powerful way. Again, engaged in an asynchronous conversation. We don't have to be all together. This can happen. Go put in your Padlet this information. You must add 1, respond to 3, and read 5. It's very much reminds me of some of my experiences in an online college course. Such a powerful way to learn things, find things out, discover new things in an asynchronous fashion. In social studies, another opportunity to observe and share information, to ask additional questions, to make real life connections, to debate and discuss. In this particular example, again, using Padlet doesn't matter. There are lots of different applications that could be utilized. There is an example here in the kind of upper middle portion where there is actually an example of a primary source picture. And the question is, what's going on in this picture? And then students are able to say, here's what's happening in this picture. And students, you even know, students started to make connections between what they said and what someone else said. So students are able to really share and showcase ideas. Another example is utilizing visual literacy and the power of visual literacy. So we're going to look at this photo and asynchronously tell us what you see in the photograph. And part of telling us what you see is if you see somebody added one that you already thought of, you can put a check mark. As you can see, many students noted that there were people in this photograph, obviously laughing and eating. Many students noticed that there were kids and a family and turkey and potatoes. And now I have a sneaking suspicion it might have been Thanksgiving and a holiday, and I am now hungry. Math could be another example to share ideas, of course, to show that there are multiple ways to solve a problem, to practice basic facts, asynchronously giving an opportunity for students to show real-life examples. In this particular example, what students were asked to do on this Jamboard, they were given this green shape in the center of the Jamboard. Their responsibility was to add a piece of information that they could tell about that shape. And in Jamboard, there's such a variety of ways. And so you can see one of the students added a sticky note that says area is length times width. I love that someone wrote quadrilateral with their very own special spelling. I see this shape of like a circle almost that means a right angle, and there are 4 different shapes such as this. Somebody pointed out that cm likely means centimeters. So there are just such a wide range of ways to engage students. So here's the thing, they're not isolated anymore. They are engaged in communicating with their peers, even if it's not happening live and in person. And if you looked at the shape the first time and didn't know anything about it, you looked at it the second time and the third time and looked at what your peers noted. And now I know, oh yeah, there are 4 sides. Oh yes, this is a rectangle or a quadrilateral, etc. So in our third stop and do, I'm going to ask you to consider ways you infuse currently or can infuse discussion in asynchronous learning. So jot down ideas. What are your thoughts about asynchronous learning at this point? And that is our stop and do number 3. Go ahead and press pause and play when you're ready to continue. Welcome back. I'm so glad you were able to put some ideas down around discussion and asynchronous learning. We're going to move on and talk about a strategy called Explore, Explain, and Apply. This strategy is a project-based approach. It is by far one of my favorite ways to engage students in asynchronous learning. It allows for student autonomy, exceptional student engagement. Explore, explain, and apply. It is one of the best ways to truly allow for students to be given and granted opportunities to learn and discover information. And quite frankly, remote and virtual teaching ought to look a little bit different, and this is one way to do just that. Let's begin by looking at all 3 of the components overall, generically. Explore begins when students are discovering information. They are questioning, asking and answering questions, gathering information. Students might be identifying facts and pieces of information, navigating through different resources, as well as responding to questions and thoughts and comments. In the exploration phase, students should have access to things like books, articles, videos, and pictures, virtual expeditions or field trips. And then the explain piece is the teacher part. So the explore is allowing the students to explore. We'll talk more about that because that's the asynchronous part. The explain piece is that synchronous lesson component. In an explanation, students are going to allow the teacher to teach and fill in the gaps, tie the information from the exploration phase together. It allows for the teacher to provide information that is too complex for students to navigate on their own, for students to get help organizing information, for the teacher to set up frameworks for organizations, provide opportunities for questions and answers, to encourage additional conversation and collaboration. The application piece is the last part. It's the time where, guess what? Students are going to take everything they've learned in the exploration and the explanation phase and apply it to an activity. They might do something like a project. They may create something from scratch or create a new idea or create a response or a solution. They may be responding to a question, completing an experiment, collecting information and data. The application phase is important because it allows for the students to kind of show off their knowledge learned, but it's important that the expectations are clear. There's an evaluation tool, a cycle for feedback, etc. But I really want us to focus in on the asynchronous piece. That's the explore part. And I need us to have an example here. So we're going to talk about planets. And in this particular example, students will be discovering all of the information they can about planets, the names of planets, commonalities, and distinguishing characteristics between planets. So the exploration phase, first and foremost, you have to set expectations for students. Here's what you have to discover. You're going to provide guiding questions and a space for students to record what they've learned. Then you ensure that all students have access to a wide range of things to explore. And so here's a list of 6 examples for planets. You're going to read this book, read an article, read a different article. There's a video clip, pictures, and a virtual field trip. And in the exploration phase, students, you must pick one of these and one of these. So I would make sure students have links and access to the books or articles, the virtual field trip, the video, the photos, and say, okay, now you get to explore. Another really quick example is in regards to planets. And I like to share different ways to look at this so you see how this can really look in the classroom. So in this particular example, it's on a Padlet. And you can see here, students have access to a wide range of things about plants, all about plants. And the directions for them for the exploration phase is to choose at least 3 to explore. There's a video clip, another video, a text that they can read and respond to. There is a poem that students can read or listen to and then draw. There is another video about the parts of a plant, etc. So students have access to all of these different things. And then in the exploration phase, there is a classroom book. And in their classroom book, students are asked to record information. And so this is Maria's page. Maria's job was, okay, you have to tell us what you learned. You need to provide 5 pieces of information that you learned. And so you can see here that Maria first put in here that plants need water and sun to grow. Okay, great. Then she must have found an image here of plants, and you can see she labeled a root, a seed, a stem, and my personal favorite, the first leaves or first leaves. But still, Maria's got it. She's got her 5 pieces of information, and each and every student can add to the book their information. And then what we have is this exploration book where I can very quickly see what did my students garner from their exploration phase? What do they need in the explanation phase? Another quick example is just to share and show off how older students can engage in this as well. This is for the War of 1812. Here's a map. What information can you glean from the map? Here's a short video, some information from history.com. Read the background and examine this photo card. Watch this video. And instead of a Google Doc, the students would have access to a note-taking space where students would be able to take notes about what led to the point of war and what were the different names of the battle and important information from each of those battles. So explore, explain, apply allows for students first to explore, for the teacher to take time in synchronous learning and perhaps in asynchronous learning to explain and kind of connect the dots. And then an application would allow for students to kind of create something from all of that learning. So stop and do number 4 is asking the simple question, where will you use? Explore, explain, and apply to boost asynchronous instruction. And so in this stop and do, you have some time to think, what is a content space that I can allow for my students to have a range of things to explore so that I can do the teaching and explaining and then give my students an opportunity to apply their knowledge. We'll go ahead and take a quick pause and play when you're ready to continue. Hey, welcome back. Thank you for thinking about explore, explain, and apply. So, okay, now we have talked a lot about different ways that we can do the activities in asynchronous learning. I want to make sure we talk about the other part, the learning style piece, the how part. And the working styles to consider, it's things like how will students get it done? Will it be independent? Will it be small group or with teacher support? Oftentimes, we get stuck in independent with asynchronous learning. I'm going to challenge that today. We could want to consider workload and pace as well. So let's talk about how we're going to get it done in a different way. So we're going to look at this example of how we can provide varying opportunities for students to get the work done in a different way. And this is to open up workstations. So after some synchronous learning, students would then go into a workstation time. You know, workstations are often kind of associated with especially elementary language arts. But the reality is in this virtual world, workstations are a great opportunity to get students to work on the work in different ways. And so here's an example of how we can differentiate for students. There could be a teacher-led workstation where there's small group instruction with the teacher, an online station where students are maybe working on an online computer program or completing some online work, an offline station where students are completing work that is independent work, or an extension where students are using their skills in additional relevant work to build that understanding and knowledge. And so in this example, we could post this. We could post this online for our students, and either the teacher has chosen, here's the workstation you're going to, or students could choose themselves. And each of those little places where you see the arrow is a place where students can click. So what this allows for is that students are not all going to be off by themselves. It may be that you have a place, okay, we're going to have a small group instruction, and in the teacher-led workstation, you're working with me, teacher. If you're open and working in that synchronous learning environment, it may be something like this. You say to your students, hey, wait, let's look at different examples and let's work differently. And here are 4 different ways that students could work. In the first one, it's an open workroom. And in an open workroom, students can talk together and discuss the work. So if students choose to be in the open workroom, that means that students are going to be engaged in conversations, which is why I chose my let's talk about it Bitmoji. I thought it was pretty funny. Number 2 is a quiet workroom. It's okay, we're going to have the workspace. I'm going to be with a small group of my classmates, but we're going to use the chat feature. We're not going to talk. In number 3, it's the teacher support room. I'm going to be in the room where it happens with my teacher, and my teacher will be able to support. And then the fourth is an independent workroom. I'm going to work by myself, and in this room we stay quiet. Now what this means is that students are kind of broken into breakout rooms, and they choose, which room do I want to be in? The cool part is you can help make those selections, right? If you have a group of students, you're like, ooh, they need some support here. Hey, so-and-so, 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 and so-and-so, you're going to be in room 3 with me. And now everyone change your name, or show me on your fingers, which room would you prefer to be in? You want to be working in an open workroom where your peers and you can chat about the work? Great. You will all go to breakout room number 1. You're ready to work quietly, but need a little chat feature so that in case you need some support, we'll put you in workroom 2. And as the teacher, I can check on all those workrooms. It is important that we acknowledge and allow ourselves to kind of take some risks in allowing for students to work differently in this awesome opportunity. I know it's scary. I'm not even going to pretend that it's not intimidating to put your students into different groups. And quite frankly, some school districts have rules about these things. You got to follow those. I get that. But the idea here is that it doesn't always have to be alone. So I'm going to ask you in Stop and Do number 5 to just consider some different ways and different work styles that you can allow for your students to engage in during asynchronous instruction. When you are ready to complete our webinar, you're going to go ahead and press play. We'll see you in just a few. Good news, I almost sang to you, welcome back, but I stopped myself. So welcome back. The last thing I want to talk about in regards to work style is choice boards. And choice boards are just that. They provide students choice. And I got to tell you, I am super passionate. Teachers, we ought to be willing to allow students to have voice and choice in our classrooms. And one way to do that is by providing them different choices. What this does is it allows the learner to be a part of their own process of learning and demonstrating learning. It allows for them to demonstrate their understanding in a range of ways, not just the way you think is most important or that you deem is the best way, but it allows for a range. And I got to tell you a secret. While I know that virtual instruction is hard work, and I respect you so much for the hard work you do for our students, the reality is that this digital environment wakes up choices so that we can provide students with hyperlinks and examples and demonstrations. It's awesome. So an example, super simple. Students have read a piece of text, they've read a book, they've done some independent reading, and now I want them to tell about the book they've read. And so oftentimes back in the olden days, back when I was a teacher, I would say to the students, write a book report or make a commercial. But instead of saying, here's what you must do, here are 3 options. Option number 1 is that you record a book review podcast. Option 2 is that you record a video book trailer. And option 3 is that you write a blog book review. Choices. Rubrics are available for all 3. The expectations are the same. You must do these things in order to be successful, but you get to choose how you do it. Another example of a much more complicated choice board, but not hard, just more complicated, is this example. And to demonstrate your understanding, choose one or more of the activities below. Here's a wide range of different things you can do. Write a series of diary entries, create a poem, or create charts that tell the story, whatever. There's so many things you can put here depending on the content. Now, the cool part about choice boards is that even if you give every single student a choice board, you have 25 students, every student gets the exact same choice board. You can still differentiate them. You can say, okay, in order to be successful, you must do the middle. So if there is something you're like, oh, but all of my students have to do this, fine, put it in the middle and say, everyone must do the middle. Instead of saying choose 1, you could say do 3 in a row or choose 3. You can absolutely hyperlink to additional materials and rubrics, exemplars, etc. You may color code your choice board. It may be color-coded based on level of difficulty or type of activity. And then you don't even have to tell the students what the colors mean, but you might say you must do one red, one yellow, and one purple. Or you may whisper into a student's ear in small group setting or via chat feature, "Hey friend, please choose at least one red." Whatever. But one of my favorite ideas that you can do for your students is to allow them to fill in an open space. So there's this open space in your choice board, and you say, if you can create an idea that meets the expectations, we'll fill it in, and you can put your own idea here. Boom. Mind-blowing. Awesome. Super fantastic. Of course, requirements can vary, and I'm going to say very clearly, requirements should not vary based on ability, but based on need. If you know your student needs to practice speaking and listening, you may say, "Hey, by the way, you really should complete one of the activities where speaking and listening is required." Okay, great. Based on need, not on ability. So what's your choice board going to look like? You'll find in the reflection guide that there's a little space where you can kind of jot out 6 different ideas. What might you include in your choice board? What are you going to do your choice board about? Is it going to be after you've done a unit on algebra? And students can choose to create directions using their coordinates, or it might be a scavenger hunt or stained glass windows. What are you going to allow for your students to choose from? We're getting to the end of our conversation today, so I want to make sure we talk about streamlining and ownership of learning. So streamlining, I want to keep it simple because that's the whole idea. Keep it simple. Keep it simple, silly. Allow for clear messaging. What clear messaging does is reduces stress. It allows for better understanding, and it allows for students to feel safe and secure, like they are part of the team. In order to streamline, use things like a regular greeting, opportunities like my turn, your turn, physical movement, signals. These things should be paced out and regular for your students. Ownership of learning. This is a graphic that I think when you see it, you will go, yes, Jen. This right here tells us what we want for our students. We want our students to be independent thinkers, explorers, and out-of-the-box thinkers. We want our students to be willing to throw out everything they've tried and try something new. We want them to take risks and manage their thinking and manage their work and manage their own projects. So over the course of the last hour plus, our goals were to identify synchronous learning. I think we've done a good job of that. We've experienced some of these different ways to integrate asynchronous opportunities. Absolutely. And I hope you've taken the time to jot down some of those ideas. How can I use the choice boards? How can I use video to best meet the needs of my students? To determine which ways you can utilize to best meet the needs of your students. As we close, I just want to close us with 2 keywords: simple and consistent. If asynchronous learning is simple and consistent, the tips that we have gone through today will benefit all of your students. Here they are. This is where we began, these 4 tips for virtual teaching and learning. And we made it through. We talked about each of them and considered what different and powerful ways we can utilize asynchronous instruction. If you'd like to learn more from teacher-created materials, check out the free professional learning options at the link shown on the screen. Remember, we want to support you no matter where you are teaching, whether it be today or in the future. As a company founded and run by teachers, we know your time is valuable. We appreciate you spending some of that time with us and hope that this training will be a use and help you be successful in your asynchronous learning experiences. It is our true goal to help you create a world in which children love to learn. Thank you for all you do, and I hope you have a wonderful school year. Stay safe and be well.